Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. I'm your host, Art Robbins, and it's great to have you join us. The Leadership Art Podcast features insightful conversations with industry leaders who lead with purpose. Here you will discover practical insights, powerful lessons, and everyday inspiration to elevate your own impact, whether you're leading now or preparing to step up. We want to inspire you to be the best leader you can be. Today's guest is Steve Baue, an executive coach, speaker, award-winning CEO, and entrepreneur with over 30 years of leadership experience at global market-leading companies. Steve went on to lead multiple businesses as CEO and owner, including a leading mental health benefit company, being recognized as a Titan 100 CEO. Today, Steve works with business leaders as a coach, where he specializes in leadership and mental health. He helps leaders grow not just their companies, but themselves, so they can make a lasting impact on their organizations and the world around them. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Art. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm really excited about today's discussion because mental health is such a key ingredient in successful leadership. And there's so much talk out there about mental health and a mental health crisis. There's so much going on in the world with the change, the uncertainty, social media, current events. People are actually looking to leaders to help lead them through this and help solve some of these problems. But yet, when I talk to leaders, they're impacted by this too. They're feeling many of the same stresses and anxieties that other people are feeling. So maybe the leaders are even under more pressure. So it'd be great to get your perspectives on what leaders can start to do to maintain and improve their mental health, as well as that of the people and organizations they're responsible for. But I thought maybe a good way to start would be just to talk about what is mental health all about, and what are some of the root causes that have led to the challenges we're facing right now.
Sure. So I always start with, I'm not a counselor. I'm a former HR executive. Sometimes I refer to myself as a former HR hack who 11 years ago bought a mental health benefit company, and then I started a second mental health company. So I always view my job as a translator, an interpreter of mental health. And I think one of the best things is starting with that definition of mental health. And so we're all born with certain behaviors: anxiety, depression, phobias, addictions. They're hardwired into the human brain. Most of us are also born with the capability to manage those behaviors, right? They don't interfere too much with our life. But then we have the external world, and we have what I call the situations. We get married, we have families, kids, right? We have jobs, we lose loved ones. And mental health is that interplay of those situations and then our natural occurring behaviors. And so sometimes the situations turn up the heat on those behaviors. I'm someone who has anxiety. I have a 16-year-old daughter who just got her driver's license. So you can imagine where my anxiety is every time she pulls out of the garage, right?
Yeah.
And then
that happened to me. I was ghost tailing my daughter for at least 2 weeks.
I love that, Art, because my wife and I, like, our hobby now is to sit on our phones in bed and watch where our daughter is on the app. How fast is she going? But so there's a situation that it's impacting the behavior. Now, sometimes the behaviors impact the situations, right? Those behaviors can cause issues in relationships, and you take the feelings of grief and how that cascades through somebody's life. So mental health is just the constant interplay between our natural occurring behaviors and then the situations of life. Now, mental illness, on the other hand, that's a biologically rooted disease. Right? That's an illness just like cancer or heart disease, diabetes. No one asks for it. No one says, geez, I hope I get schizophrenia. The issues that we have around it, though, is that, interestingly, if you go back to 2,000, 3,000 years ago, go back to Egyptian times, there's medical journals. They were doing some crazy experiments on the physical body. But mental health, mental illness particularly, I grew up in the 70s about 3 blocks away from an asylum where they literally locked people up for things that are now considered kind of mainstream mental health issues.
Mhm.
So we have thousands of years difference between our physical health understanding and what we understand about mental illness. But again, I always go to mental illness is now we're talking about a disease, we're talking about an illness versus mental health, which is just where we're at every hour, every day,
So
reacting to the world around us.
mental health is more about your behavior.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I
And
mean,
our reactions.
is it possible that unchecked mental
Yeah.
health could lead to mental illness?
Yeah, it's not a straight line between A and B, but especially if your behaviors tend to be up on the higher end to begin with, and then you neglect some of the things that are necessary to keep a healthy, uh, you know, I joke that this is one operating system, right? What happens above the eyebrow impacts below and vice versa. And if we don't take care of ourselves, there's a lot of tentacles that come from that, both physically and mentally. And yes, just as if we neglect certain things with our physical health, they can trip into illness. The same things if we neglect with our mental health could trip into illness.
Like you mentioned diabetes earlier.
Yeah,
You may not be diabetic, but your behavior could lead to
right,
diabetes.
right. So it's very similar. It's just the problem is that we just don't have the same amount of volume of understanding when it comes to our mental health and our mental illness.
Okay. So bottom line, people need to make this a priority. When they think
I-
about the health, mental health needs to be front and center along with physical health.
Right. And physical health is a part of mental health, and we can
Mhm.
talk about that more. But here's two numbers I like to put out there since this is a leadership podcast.
Mhm.
60% of leaders reported feeling mentally overwhelmed in the last 12 months.
Mhm.
So over half of the leaders were cashing out because of either, again, the behaviors or the situations that they're dealing with. And now I'm seeing data that's pointing to that almost 50% of turnover can be pointed back to burnout that
Mhm.
we have going on right now, where burnout is the physical, mental, physical exhaustion that we have of just trying to keep going.
So getting back to root causes, what are you finding some of the most common root causes are for the burnout?
Well, look at the world today. Things
Sometimes I'd rather not, but
right, right,
I'm a
exactly.
natural optimist. So
Well, I joke that I have a pessimistic optimist.
a
Right.
realistic optimist.
Yes. No, but you look at organizations, you go all the way back to the Great Recession, where organizations learned that you could do more with less. And oftentimes that was more responsibility across less people. You have right now, you have organizations downsizing the adoption of new technologies like AI, and how does that fit in there? You have still the lingering effects of COVID. COVID pushed us into a mental health crisis that we still haven't recovered from.
Mhm.
When you look at the rates of anxiety, depression, diagnoses of anxiety, depression, they keep going up every year. We're seeing more and more of it. Now, part of it is we're becoming a little bit more comfortable speaking about our mental health. We are being taught how to recognize our mental health. But I think a driver of that, though, is also just the situations that leaders now have to lead in are not particularly healthy situations for the leader or necessarily the employees either.
I think a lot of the challenges I see is leaders are themselves looking for direction. They're looking
Yeah,
for a compass and they feel like they're being pulled in directions that maybe aren't natural to them or they're questioning, is this right? Are these layoffs the right thing to do?
right,
Should we
right,
be cutting back here? Are these growth targets too aggressive? But are
right,
so many pressures, or there's an unforeseen competitor, and say, I don't really understand this
right.
competitor. How do I react to that? How do I regain my advantage?
I did a LinkedIn survey because I had seen another survey done in the UK and I was curious. And I put a question out of how many people receive training in leadership before their first leadership role,
Mhm.
or were given even moving into their first role, how much support they were given. And it was well over 80% of people that responded weren't taught how to lead before they were thrust into leadership positions. And I think the number was something like 20, 30% have asked for help and they're still waiting on
Yep.
that help.
Yep.
And so you have this very complex environment. And what other job can you have where you're just thrown in to it and said, figure it out? Go lead these group of people. And oh, by the way, we expect high performance teams, we expect growth targets, we expect all of these things to come, but people aren't being trained in how do you actually lead others.
That's a very common theme
Yeah.
in these episodes that they're being taught are the mechanical things or the science of management, but they're
Right.
not being taught the soft skills.
Right.
And the leaders that have had good role models or good sponsors in the company have helped close that gap. But if they can't find those role models, they're left on their own.
Right.
And then it becomes trial and error for a lot of people, which leads
Well,
to the frustration.
I do executive coaching. I work with senior leaders in organizations. I would say over half of them, a good chunk of their leadership style is them mimicking something that they've seen before, whether leaders they have, mentors. And I'm not taking anything away from mentors and coaches and good bosses and so forth. The problem you run into, and this relates back to the mental health, is that if a leader doesn't have either the capacity or hasn't taken the time or hasn't been given the guidance to figure out what their authentic leadership is, what's true to them, their values, how they want to lead, then you are multiplying the problem that they have, because I always say employees can smell inauthenticity in a leader from a mile away,
Mhm.
right? When the behaviors and the words don't match the feeling. And so again, back to that issue, if someone hasn't been shown how to lead in there and really get to the heart of how they need to lead, that's compounding that mental health aspect for themselves as well as the employees.
That is totally consistent with a key lesson that's come out of almost every episode I've done here. You have to know yourself
Yeah,
first. You
yeah.
have to be self-aware because when you talk about authenticity, you have an internal compass. I mean, you know what your values are and what leadership style
Mhm,
will convey those values.
mhm.
And if you're in a situation and you don't know where that compass is pointing, you won't know how to cope with the situation.
Yeah, the best of intentions is not going to help you through that.
But what's interesting, and I know I keep referring to prior episodes, but I've been on a learning journey being the
Yeah.
host of this thing as well. And we recently had a very talented Enzier on an episode. And she was a CEO. She started new businesses and did coaching and counseling herself. And she said that one of the issues with young people just that who are in college, coming out of college, is they're trying to fit a mold that they believe society wants them to shape into,
Hmm.
even if it has nothing to do with themselves, even has nothing to do with what they are interested in
Yeah.
doing. But
Yeah.
it's like the college application say you have to show a mass of activities,
Yeah.
right? You have to check all these boxes to be considered a good candidate. Say, well, what
Yeah.
if I'm interested in
Yeah.
those boxes? What if I'm interested in something else?
Yeah.
So they're going through, and this isn't just like spending an hour filling out an application. This is like your whole life during high school and college. They're spending years
Yeah.
trying to meet what they perceive as someone else's
Right.
expectation. And even if they get into the college they want, they're not happy, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And if you're not happy, how can you know yourself? How can you lead effectively? How could you have mental health
Right.
if you've steered your life in a totally different direction?
Art, I love that. And it's every generation. I went through that. I'm a Gen Xer, the forgotten generation, right? The ones that got skipped over.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm a hey boomer generation. I'll admit it.
but I'll tell you, I came out of high school, went to college. This was the late 80s, early 90s. And it was all about the movie Wall Street and Secret of My Success and Reaganomics. And
Hmm.
right, it was get into a big corporation, put your head down, don't look up until you're at the top of the org chart.
Right.
And talking in this idea of mental health, I was, what was this? It was about, we're about 12, 13 years ago. I'm flying to Italy. I work for an Italian-based shipbuilder, second largest shipbuilder in the world. I'm flying to Italy, first class. I'm going to get there. I'm going to be wined. I'm going to be dined. I'm going to spend a week in the heart of Venice. And I am absolutely miserable, right? I was at wit's end. I was at the top of the org chart, top of my career. But it was really in that flight that I had the realization that that plan I had been working was the plan that was given to everybody, right?
Mm.
It was this is what you should do, this is how
Right.
you should be. And it was well intentioned, but it wasn't until I actually looked and said, well, what do I want? And what came out of that was meaning. And so it was a year later that I left corporate and I bought my first mental health company. Now, the overlay of that, which I didn't know at the time, I was displaying every major symptom of burnout in that time
But
period.
you didn't recognize it.
Had no idea, didn't know what it was. I joke that I
Yeah.
had burnout before burnout was cool, right? You talk about the symptoms of burnout, that feeling of mental, physical, emotional exhaustion, the self-doubt and negativity of trusting who you are, not being able to find joy in my work or even with my life, being short with my daughter at the time was like 6 years old. And I'm finding myself not always being a good dad around her. Now, years later, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I was in the midst of a real severe case of burnout. Luckily, I had that aha moment on that flight where I realized that what I needed to do was do something for myself and something that I felt gave meaning to not just my life, but gave meaning to others.
Yeah. Why do you think people don't recognize it? Is it like if you're in a big corporation, they're trying to fit you into the mold?
Yeah, that's
So,
exactly.
so you're with a whole team of whether you're middle management or upper middle
Yeah,
management, and you're all behaving the same way. So you say, "Well, I'm trying to stay two steps ahead
yeah,
of the next guy,"
yeah.
but in reality, you're not happy whether you're two steps ahead
Right,
or dead even or two steps behind. You're still
right.
doing what you want to do.
What I
You're
learned, Art,
pushed, you're pushed into this race, whether
yes,
you realize it or not.
right? It was everything I thought I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I tell people I was really good at my job. It wasn't like I was an underperformer. I was really good at it, but being good at something and finding meaning in it are two very different things. So what I found out is, and this is now 11 years into owning two mental health companies, that you basically have four batteries that you have to focus on.
Okay.
The first one is the physical,
Mhm.
right? That's, again, I go back to one operating system, right? What happens above the eyebrow impacts below, vice versa. So things like diet, exercise, sleep. Then you have what I call your mind battery or your brain. And that's where you get performance, right? This is the ability to what I call GSD, get done, right? That you're able to lock in, you can prioritize, you focus. Learning is a part of that, neuroplasticity. Then you have emotions, your emotional battery, which is probably the closest to true mental health component of that. That's how you deal with stress. Harvard has done the longest study ever, 87 years now, of what drives happiness. And they have thousands of participants that have been in there. They started it back in 1939, I want to say. The number one driver of happiness is relationships
Mhm. Mhm.
by a country mile,
Mhm.
right? It's the quality and the depth of relationships. But here in the US, we have an epidemic of loneliness.
Mhm.
We think the virtual connections, the LinkedIn connections, the Instagram likes are a substitution for a deep emotional relationship with somebody.
Yeah.
And then the
Social
last path,
media makes that worse. It creates these
oh,
channels
right,
to
right.
exacerbate it.
It's not real. It's puffy clouds. And so you have body, you have mind, you have emotions. And then the last one, and it's the one that I had to go through, is what I call spiritual or in spirit.
Mhm.
And that's where you get into the values that we talked about, authenticity. We
Mhm.
talk about passions, the
Mhm.
things that are unique to us that give us energy, and then purpose, meaning. Why are we on this big spinning rock? What's the thing that you feel driven to contribute?
How can a leader recognize these things
Yeah.
earlier?
Yeah, I
So
think,
to preempt the burnout,
yeah,
to not be in the company for 5+ years, even longer,
yeah,
and realize this has no semblance to what I really want to do. What's
right.
really going to make me happy.
There's two pieces to that. The first one is I always say those four batteries, recognizing that you have those four batteries. You invest in those four, you're ahead of the game,
Mhm.
right? But I'd say investing in those batteries, it's like trying to fill a bathtub one end at a time. You have to engage all four. Right? If you
Never
go
tried
really,
that.
yeah, if you go deep on one and you neglect the other three, you're still going to be kittywampus,
Right,
right? It's
right.
it's it's balance. So that's the first part of it is. The second part is to understand, you think about your phones, right? There's low power mode in your phone. That's where they used to ask you at 20%, do you want to go into low power mode? And we weren't smart enough to say yes enough. So now they don't ask us anymore.
Mhm.
And so when a phone goes into low power mode, if you just put it off to the side for a while, it doesn't charge up, right? You have to plug it in. And that's the same thing with the symptoms, the idea of burnout, the syndrome of burnout, is that it's why a good night's sleep doesn't fix it. You have to, in order to reverse those symptoms of burnout, that chronic workplace stress, you have to actively and consistently plug yourself into the things that give you energy.
Mhm.
And so, for a leader, if I were sitting in front of a class of new leaders and say, listen, this burnout it's real, it's devastating. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. How do you deal with it before it becomes a problem? Recognize the four batteries and recognize you have to find the things that give you energy and you got to prioritize them in your life to make sure that you are, keeping those battery levels at least above 20%.
Yeah, and you have to force yourself to make time,
Yeah,
or
right?
say, I am not going to work this weekend, or I'm going to
Yeah, or
turn
it's
off my phone, or I'm going to go to the gym, or
right.
take a vacation.
I'll give you something really simple that I did when I first bought ERC, my mental health benefit company, 11 years ago. My daughter was 5, 6 years old at the time, first grade. On 90% of mornings, I didn't roll into the office until 9 a.m. because I drove her to school.
Mhm.
And that charged my battery, right? When she was in grade school, middle school, once she hit high school, it wasn't as fun driving her to school anymore. It was like we didn't have a lot of conversations, but I loved those mornings of driving her to school. And then where I could, I'd even go pick her up after school. But that was something that I just told everyone, unless it's really important to the business and to the success of the company, this is my time to go engage in something that fills my battery, right? It was relationship, it's the emotional component of it.
That's a great example. That's actually one of the benefits of the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
you could have a checkerboard workday and say,
Yeah.
I'm going to spend this time during the day with my daughter or my family, and then I'll
Yeah.
work another part of the day. But a lot of people don't take advantage of
Right.
that. They,
Well, and again, it's awareness. Awareness is so much of this. Technically, here's an interesting fact, Art. Burnout is actually not a diagnosable mental health condition. The components of it are the stress, the anxiety, everything that goes along it. But the World Health Organization calls it a syndrome. It's not a condition, it's a
interesting.
syndrome. But their
And
definition
what's the
is,
difference? What's the difference between?
well, it's a syndrome. I always joke that that's their workaround, that we haven't gotten smart enough to make it a diagnosable condition yet. So they call it a burnout as a syndrome of chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed.
Mhm.
And I like that because one, burnout tends to come from work. It comes from the stress that comes from work. And it's the fact that we haven't figured out how to successfully manage it for ourselves.
Okay. How do you counsel a leader or anybody that is trying to get to this balance and they
Yeah.
realize in order to do this, in order to attain happiness, I'm going to have to make a significant change. Maybe I
Yeah.
do need to change jobs or careers, and
Right.
that ultimately requires courage
Yeah.
to do that. And getting over that courage hurdle could introduce yet another level of stress. How do you counsel
Yeah.
them to have the courage to make a healthy change?
So first off, I love that you use the word courage because that's what anytime I meet with a prospective client for my coaching practice, I always talk about do you recognize that there are some things that you could be doing greater? I don't like the word better. I like using the word greater.
Okay.
Better is judgy.
Mhm.
Greater means, expansion. Do you recognize that there's things that you could work on to be greater? And then I'm like, do you have the courage to address them? And are you willing to put in the work?
Mhm.
But here's the biggest thing. Again, where I focus on with my executive clients is that we spend 2 months at the beginning of the process. I work on a 6 to 9 month process. My coaching has a beginning, middle, and end. I had executive coaches all through my career. They were never ending. I loved them. They were great. But after a while, I was making stuff up, right? It was like, what am I going to talk about? So I've always said, I want to be the coach that gets in, helps, and then gets out.
Got it.
And so we spend 2 months, and what we're doing is we're going through as much data as we can collect. I use some assessment tools, and we isolate what's the one thing that if you really worked on for the next 4 months, and I call it the big domino. If you can knock that big domino, it's going to have a big impact in both your leadership and your life.
Mhm.
And by the definition of domino, meaning that if you can push that one over, the next one becomes a little bit easier and
Mhm.
you've created space for it to happen.
Okay. Oh, and a
And
lot of other
so
things will fall into place.
and so what's the one big thing? And sometimes I will tell you, they come in going, I want to work on X.
Mhm.
And you build trust and you make a safe place and you get the data in front of them. And then 9 times out of 10, we work on something completely different than what they thought. Because now they're realizing if you put leadership in terms of measure it by impact, legacy, the idea of helping others, you change that frame and keeping your own sanity in it, benefiting from that, you end up focusing on something oftentimes much different than what they thought they were going to do.
These are very good lessons, and putting the leader hat back on.
Mm,
And the earlier point we made that people are looking to leaders
yeah,
to
yeah.
lead and to provide solutions. Let's say a leader has achieved this level of enlightenment and his compass is in the right place. He's
Sure.
self-aware.
Yeah,
He's in a good balance.
yeah,
Maybe not ideal, but
right. She's
he's
got it all figured out, right? She's
he's
firing on
got to figure
cylinders.
out what things can they do
Yeah,
to help their team
yeah,
with their mental health to get in
right.
a similar good place.
Yeah. You know, that's a great question, Art. Here's the thing that I've learned. Most of the time, listening is help.
Mhm.
I had to learn, my wife and I have been together for 26 years. I had to learn, and I still sometimes forget this lesson. She's very successful in her career. It's a very complex job. She works with employers, she works with students, college level. And she'll come home and she'll start telling me something. And I have to remember that most of the time she just wants me to listen
Mhm.
and that my help is not help. That-
Don't answer, just listen.
right? And I carry that, and I work with a lot of leaders, and I work with a lot of leaders at the beginning of their journeys. And I'm always like, listen, you don't have to be the solution person. where people first and foremost just want to be acknowledged and heard.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not a counselor, but I joke I have some counseling lines. And the first one is, that must be very difficult, right? And people go, it is. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah,
And I will tell you, Art, over half the time, that's just what the person was looking for.
they're looking
Right.
for someone that understands their plight, that has
Right.
empathy for them.
There's a big difference between, hey, how's it going? And you going, no, how's it going?
Hmm.
Those are two very different questions. And that second one is actually being a human being
Yeah.
and showing interest in people. The next thing is to understand that, part of your job is to create space for people to have space, right? To recognize that you can't just run flat out 24/7, that there is boundaries and there should be boundaries in people's lives. You talk about that fractional workday. Now, again, you and I came out of careers where there was a little bit of flexibility, but that whenever a leader can utilize that flexibility, understanding that people have some different work styles, they have different cycles of their day when energy is highest, there's different techniques, and allowing people to be productive at work, but then also to understand that they have lives outside of work.
Mhm.
I do my best. In fact, when I have to email or text after hours, I put right at the beginning of this, I'm sending this now because it's convenient for me. I don't expect an answer until it's convenient from you,
That's actually very considerate.
right?
It truly is. Yeah.
Right.
And that's a great point.
And
Great.
I mean, in mental health, it is a 24/7, 365 operation,
Sure.
right? And so we have to have a level of availability. But that availability is about 10%. It's not 100%. All right. Me asking for August financials right now is not, I don't need them at 8 o'clock at night.
That
Right.
makes sense. Hey, there are a couple of things I wanted to explore with you before our time is up. And with your own leadership journey,
Mm.
it sounds like you first got exposed to mental health after you left the shipbuilding company,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
What attracted you to it that
Yeah.
has made turned into a career that's turned into a
Right.
life's work?
So going back to that flight, again, first class, big job, big paycheck, all the perks. I'm not paying a dime for this.
Mhm.
And I'm miserable. And so I had bought a book in the Atlanta airport bookstore, and it's called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin.
Okay.
And so I settle in my little first class pod and I open the book. And this Gretchen Rubin and I, it was amazing because we had the same career to almost the same point. Hers was in law, mine was in HR. And she has this moment in the book where she looks at her reflection and she asks herself, what do you want out of life? And her response was happiness, that hence
Mhm.
the name of the book.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, well, this is interesting. So I literally turned to my reflection in the airplane window and I asked myself, what do you want out of life? And the word that came out, Art, was meaning.
Mhm.
And if you would have asked me that question any other time, any other place, I would have told you the word would have been success.
Mhm.
But in that moment of vulnerability, I said meaning. And so fast forward, I get done with the trip. I tell my wife that I can't keep going like this, that I have to make a change. I started looking for an opportunity where I felt I could derive meaning, true meaning from, and help others. And so mental health was right up, I mean, it checked all the boxes, right? To be the place that someone turns to when things are getting tough, when things are getting dark in their life, when they realize that they need help, to be that organization, I take that as a great privilege and honor to have that. My coaching practice is meaning. It's taking everything I've learned, but more importantly, creating a space like executives like you are, where they can go explore the tough stuff and I can help them find their answers. And what helps me with that is that I've had the context of being in that job. And I joke that the beauty is when I'm coaching, I get to be back in that world with none of the responsibility that I had. And so the next chapter, I'm 55 now. Owning a mental health company is great. I'm not a counselor. I'm the last guy you want to talk to about your mental health. I'm now thinking about, well, how do I get even closer to directly helping people versus being the step away that I am right now?
To wrap up together what you're saying is you were initially focused on success. You realized that what you really needed was meaning, but by finding your meaning, you've enhanced your success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something I've seen with many people, that the key really is to focus on the meaning. And if you're passionate about that, you ultimately will achieve the
Right.
success that you deserve.
Right. And it's also not always the typical definition of success,
Yeah,
right?
it's not money. Yeah. Money may follow,
Right.
but that's not the only ingredient
Right.
of success. Hey, one thing I have to ask you, I'd love for you to talk about the painting on your
Oh,
wall.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Or the print. Is that a print? Oh,
yeah, so it's a print. I can't tell you exactly. Let me get my camera there.
there we go.
So that's Don Quixote.
Don
I've
Quixote,
had that
the man of
hanging,
La Mancha.
right? I had that hanging in my last corporate office. Before that, it hung in our dining room at our house. And it is there to remind me to not fight the windmills, to
Mhm.
not fight progress.
Mhm.
As I get older, you get a little, your rut gets a little deeper, your comfort zone gets a little smaller. You know what you like. But I've learned that there are times that I dig in on things that are just their progress. It's the way the world's going. And so I keep that there to remind me that sometimes the fight isn't the right fight, right? That my energy would be best served otherwise. Here's the other thing. That painting, and I couple that with I tend to hire young. Mainly my support staff, the team that works with me. I have a lot of millennials and Gen Zs.
Mhm.
And they're the ones that also, this painting and them keep me in check in terms of,
They keep you grounded.
I joke that I'm like 2 steps away from being the old guy yelling, get off my lawn, right? I want to make sure that I'm open to ideas and progress.
Good for you. That's a great motivation. And I think the world is better off for what you're doing
I
because
appreciate that.
mental health is obviously a critical success factor to
Yeah.
leadership and just to well-being of society and
Yeah.
the humans. And you're making an impact.
I
So
appreciate that.
I could really see the passion that you have for it. So your quest for meaning, I guess the Don Quixote was on a quest, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you were on a quest to find your meaning,
Right.
and you found it in mental health, and you become very successful. So congratulations and thank you for that.
Hey, I thank you, Art. This is great that you're taking all your experience and all that wealth of knowledge you have and now have a format where you can share that with others. I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you very much. Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's like I said, it's been a learning journey for me, and I've really enjoyed it. I hope I'm making my little dent in the
Uh,
universe too.
Thank you, Art.
No, you're welcome, Steve. Thank you again for being our guest. And in closing, I also want to thank our listeners and followers. Thank you for joining us and for your continued support. So until the next episode of the Leadership Art Podcast, this is your host, Art Robbins. And remember, it's your lead.